The Unspoken Pages, Chapter 1, The Weight of an Ideal. Charlotte, North Carolina. The city thrived with a modern hum, a relentless march of progress. But for Sarah Miller, 50 years old, life had recently slowed to a profound, melancholic quiet. Her mother, Evelyn Miller, had passed away peacefully in her sleep, just 2 years after her beloved father, Richard. The house, once vibrant with the gentle rhythm of her parents' lives, now echoed with Sarah's own solitary footsteps. Evelyn Miller. The name itself conjured an image of perfection. To Sarah, her mother had been the epitome of grace, strength, and unwavering devotion. An impeccable homemaker, a gracious hostess, a pillar of the community, and above all, a loving, faultless wife and mother. Evelyn had exuded a quiet, elegant strength, never complaining, always smiling, always putting others first. She was Sarah's North Star, the unattainable ideal that Sarah, throughout her life, had relentlessly strived to emulate. Sarah, a successful architect, often felt she fell short of her mother's silent perfection, a quiet inadequacy that gnawed at her. Now, with both parents gone, Sarah felt adrift, unmoored from the anchors that had defined her existence. It was time to clear out the house, a task that felt both necessary and excruciating. Each object was a memory, each room a testament to a life she thought she knew so well. One sweltering afternoon, while sifting through her mother's meticulously organized dresser drawers, Sarah found it. Tucked beneath a stack of delicately folded linen handkerchiefs, hidden beneath a false bottom in the drawer, was a small, leather-bound book. It was old, its cover worn smooth, its pages faintly yellowed at the edges. A tiny, ornate silver clasp held it shut. Sarah's breath hitched. A diary. Her mother, Evelyn Miller, had kept a diary? The thought was astonishing, almost sacrilegious. Evelyn had been an intensely private woman, sharing little of her inner world. The idea that she had secretly committed her thoughts to paper for decades was utterly alien to Sarah's understanding of her. And the date on the first page, etched in elegant looping script, sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. October 10th, 1984. 40 years ago. Her mother had been keeping this secret for 40 years. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Sarah. Curiosity, apprehension, and a strange sense of betrayal. Why had Evelyn kept this hidden? What secrets could possibly lie within these pages? Sarah's hands trembled as she unfastened the clasp. The pages smelled faintly of dried roses and old paper. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, she began to read. The first entries were exactly what Sarah expected. Loving descriptions of her father, Richard, my devoted husband, and tender musings about young Sarah, my precious daughter. Evelyn wrote of the joys of motherhood, the comforts of her home, the satisfaction of a life well ordered. Sarah felt a warm, nostalgic ache, a confirmation of the perfect life she believed her parents had shared, a life she had always idolized. But as Sarah continued to read, the tone subtly shifted, imperceptibly at first, then with a growing, unsettling clarity. Beneath the elegant script and the seemingly content observations, a different voice began to emerge, a voice tinged with a quiet melancholy, a yearning that went unspoken, an undercurrent of profound, aching dissatisfaction. The ideal image of Evelyn Miller, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, began to crack, piece by agonizing piece, revealing a complexity Sarah had never, in her wildest dreams, imagined. Chapter 2. The Cracks in the Facade. As Sarah delved deeper into the diary, the initial gentle warmth of nostalgia gave way to a growing sense of unease. The entries, while still loving towards her father and herself, began to reveal a profound inner world Evelyn had meticulously hidden. Evelyn wrote of moments of intense loneliness, a feeling of being trapped in a life that, while outwardly perfect, felt profoundly unfulfilling. November 22nd, 1987. Another perfect dinner party. Richard was charming, as always. The house looked lovely. Everyone praised my cooking. But I felt like an actress on a stage, playing a role. Who is Evelyn Miller, behind the apron and the perfect smile? I don't even know anymore. Sarah felt a chill. Her mother, a lonely actress? It was a stark contrast to the vibrant, content woman she had known. Evelyn wrote of a deep, secret passion for art, for painting, a talent she had suppressed after marriage, as it wasn't practical. She spoke of dreams of travel, of exploring distant lands, especially Paris, a city she had only seen in books, but which haunted her imagination. Then came the entries about a past love, a man named James Harrison. The name sent a jolt through Sarah. She had never heard of him. Evelyn wrote of him with a raw, aching tenderness, a passion that vibrated off the page. James was an artist, a free spirit, their love a whirlwind of creativity and youthful rebellion. They had planned to run away together, to live a life devoted to art and adventure. But Evelyn's family, traditional and rigid, had forbidden the match. James was deemed unsuitable, unstable. They had pressured Evelyn to marry Richard, a stable, well-to-do businessman who offered security and respectability. April 5th, 1984. Today marks 40 years since I chose duty over love. Richard is a good man, a kind man. He provides well. But my heart still aches for the life I could have had with James. Sometimes, when Richard touches me, I close my eyes and imagine it's James. I know it's a terrible sin, but I can't help it. My soul feels like a bird trapped in a gilded cage. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Her father, the man she had idealized as the perfect husband, had been second choice. Her mother, the paragon of virtue, had harbored a lifelong regret, a secret love. The layers of Evelyn's life, as Sarah understood it, began to peel away, revealing an uncomfortable, complex truth. The diary continued to unravel more painful truths. Evelyn wrote of a profound depression she experienced after Sarah's birth, a struggle with a sense of inadequacy, and a surprising difficulty bonding with her infant daughter. June 10th, 1974. Sarah is 6 months old. She is beautiful. Everyone says so. But I feel nothing. Just exhaustion and a crushing weight of responsibility. I look at her and I see myself, trapped. This isn't what I wanted. I feel like a terrible mother. Richard doesn't understand. He says it's just the baby blues, but it's more. It's a hollowness inside me. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. The revelation was a gut punch. Her mother, the nurturing, endlessly patient woman who had always seemed to embody unconditional love, had struggled. She had felt nothing. It was a terrifying thought, shattering the very foundation of Sarah's self-perception. She had always felt a subtle emotional distance from her mother, a barrier she could never quite breach, and had blamed herself. Now, she wondered if it had been a reflection of her mother's own unspoken pain. As Sarah continued to read, a new, even more startling detail emerged. Evelyn wrote of receiving letters, secret letters, over decades, from James. December 1st, 1985. Another letter arrived today, from James. He never stops. He asks if I'm happy, if I ever think of him. He still uses the old postbox address. He still believes in us. I can't bring myself to answer. It would tear everything apart, but oh, how I long to. Just once. To tell him. What? That I'm still here? Still dreaming of him? Sarah felt a desperate urge to find these letters. They were another piece of the puzzle, another voice from her mother's hidden life. Chapter 3. The Secret Escapes. The diary chronicled Evelyn's quiet acts of rebellion, her desperate attempts to breathe life back into her stifled spirit. She wrote of meticulously planned shopping trips that were, in fact, secret escapes. October 12th, 1990. Richard believes I'm at the charity luncheon. Instead, I'm on a train to New York. Just for a day, to see the galleries, to feel alive again. I bought that abstract painting, the one with the vibrant blues and reds. Richard will hate it. He'll say it doesn't match the decor. But I don't care. It calls to me. It reminds me of James, of freedom. Sarah remembered that painting, a large abstract piece, stark and vibrant, hanging in the formal living room. Her father had hated it, and her mother had simply smiled, a Mona Lisa smile, and insisted it stayed. Sarah had always found it jarring, out of place in their perfectly traditional home. She understood its true significance. It was a tangible piece of her mother's hidden yearning. Another entry described a brief, almost desperate trip to Paris, a city that had haunted Evelyn's imagination since childhood. May 5th, 1998. Paris. Just for 2 days. Richard thinks I'm with Aunt Mildred in Florida. The lie tastes bitter, but the air here, it tastes of freedom. I walked the streets for hours, visited the Louvre, saw the Mona Lisa. I thought of James, of the life we could have built here, away from everything. The diary became a portal to a mother Sarah never knew, a woman of profound longing, hidden passions, and quiet rebellion. Where were they? If Evelyn had received them for decades, they must be somewhere in this house, another secret tucked away. Sarah began a methodical search, tearing apart her mother's meticulously organized wardrobe, her vast collection of books, her antique jewelry boxes. She found them in a false bottom of a cedar chest in the back of her mother's closet, carefully tied with a faded ribbon. A stack of envelopes, yellowed with age, bearing various postmarks from different cities, but all addressed in the same elegant, familiar hand, James Harrison. Sarah picked up the first letter, her heart pounding. The postmark was from New York, 1984. My dearest Evelyn, it's been too long, too many years, but I can't stop thinking about you, about us. Are you happy? Do you ever think of me? I'm still painting, still struggling, but I'm free. And I still believe in the love we shared. I'm in New York now. If you ever need an escape, a new life, a place where you can truly be yourself, know that my door is always open. My heart is always open. Come find me. Forever yours, James. Each letter was a testament to a love that had never died, a desperate plea for a life that could have been. James wrote of his triumphs, his failures, his art. But always, always he returned to Evelyn, to the hope that she would one day find her way back to him. He never stopped. For 40 years, he had written to the ghost of his past, never knowing if she received his words, if she still lived. The weight of her mother's secret life, the silent agony of her choices, pressed down on Sarah. She had lived her entire life in the shadow of an ideal, while her mother had lived in a shadow of her own making, haunted by a love she couldn't claim. Chapter 4: Echoes of a Forbidden Love. Armed with the shocking truth of her mother's hidden life, Sarah felt a profound shift within herself. The anger she initially felt towards her mother for the deception was slowly replaced by a deep, aching empathy. Evelyn hadn't been flawless. She had been human, flawed, and profoundly lonely. The letters from James were a haunting symphony of what-ifs. They spanned decades, each one a testament to his unwavering love and hope. He wrote of his art, his struggles, his travels, always circling back to Evelyn, to their shared past, to the life they had dreamed of. He mentioned living in various cities, New York, then San Francisco, then back to a quieter life in a small artist community. Sarah felt a desperate urge to find James. He was the missing piece, the other half of her mother's untold story. She typed his name into a search engine, along with artist and the towns mentioned in the letters. It was a long shot, but she had to try. The internet, a tool her mother had barely understood, proved to be an unexpected ally. After several days of searching, she found him. A small, independent art gallery in Fairhope, Alabama, listed a James Harrison, resident artist. The gallery's website featured a blurred photograph of an older man with piercing blue eyes, the same eyes that Evelyn had described so passionately in her diary. His bio mentioned his early life in North Carolina, his journey as a struggling artist, and his lifelong devotion to his craft. Sarah hesitated for days, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. What would she say to him? "My mother, your lost love, just died, and she kept your letters for 40 years, and she lived a life of quiet despair, always thinking of you." It felt too raw, too intrusive, but the thought of leaving this final chapter of her mother's story untold, of not giving James the closure he deserved, was unbearable. She decided to call the gallery. The woman who answered, her voice warm and welcoming, introduced herself as Maggie. "Maggie O'Connell, I own the gallery. Can I help you?" "My name is Sarah Miller," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm calling about James Harrison. I believe he knew my mother, Evelyn Miller, from North Carolina, many years ago." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Maggie's voice, now tinged with a profound sadness, spoke again. "Evelyn? Oh, my dear, Evelyn. I knew her. She was my best friend before she disappeared into that life. She was always so vibrant, so full of fire. And James never forgot her. Not for a single day." Sarah felt a wave of relief, followed by a surge of tears. Maggie was Evelyn's old friend, the missing link. They spoke for hours, sharing fragments of a shared past. Maggie confirmed everything in the diary: Evelyn's rebellious spirit, her profound love for James, the family pressure, the heartbreak. Maggie had tried to stay in touch, but Evelyn had slowly drifted away, building the walls around her heart. "James is here, Sarah," Maggie said, her voice soft. He's still painting, and he's still, in his own way, waiting for her. He never married. He lived a life of quiet devotion to his art and to the memory of Evelyn. Maggie offered to arrange a meeting. Sarah's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and anticipation. This was it, the final unraveling. Chapter 5, The Unfinished Story. The drive to Fairhope, Alabama, was a journey not just across states, but across the landscape of Sarah's own life. She had always prided herself on her rationality, her control, her meticulous planning, but the diary had shattered that illusion. It had revealed a mother who was far more complex, more flawed, and ultimately more human than Sarah had ever dared to imagine. And in doing so, it had forced Sarah to confront her own meticulously constructed facade of perfection. She arrived at Maggie's art gallery, a charming space filled with vibrant, expressive paintings. Maggie, her eyes kind and knowing, greeted her with a warm embrace. "You have your mother's eyes, dear," she murmured. Then she led Sarah to a back room, a quiet studio filled with canvases and the scent of oil paint. An older man, his back to them, was hunched over an easel, his silver hair catching the light. He turned and Sarah's breath hitched. It was James. His face was lined with age, but his eyes, the same intelligent, passionate blue, held a profound sadness that seemed to mirror her mother's own. "James," Maggie said softly, "this is Sarah, Evelyn's daughter." James's eyes widened, a flicker of something ancient and beautiful passing through them. He slowly put down his paintbrush. "Evelyn's daughter," he repeated, his voice raspy, filled with decades of unexpressed emotion. Sarah handed him a small, worn packet tied with a faded ribbon. "These are from my mother," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Her diary, it spoke of you. She kept every one of your letters." James's hands trembled as he took the letters, his gaze fixed on the familiar envelopes, the precise handwriting he had known so well. He opened one, his eyes scanning the words he had written decades ago, his own hopes and dreams laid bare. They talked for hours, sitting amidst the scent of oil paint and old memories. James recounted their whirlwind romance, his unshakable belief in their future, his desperation when Evelyn disappeared from his life. He spoke of his letters, sent into the void, never knowing if they reached her, if she read them. He never married, never truly loved again, his heart forever bound to the girl he had lost. "I always hoped," James confessed, his voice barely a whisper, "that one day she would come back, or that I would find her, that she would walk into my gallery and we would finally finish our story." Sarah, in turn, told him about Evelyn's life, the perfect facade, the golden cage, the secret trips, the hidden art. She read him passages from Evelyn's diary, passages about her longing for him, her profound regret, her silent suffering. She read the entry about the last letter she received, her mother's anguish at not being able to respond. James listened, tears streaming down his face. "She never forgot," he murmured. "She truly never forgot me." The shared narrative brought a strange, poignant closure. A love story, fragmented and interrupted, was finally pieced together, not by the lovers themselves, but by the daughter who had stumbled upon its echoes. There was no grand reunion, no rekindling of a lost romance, just understanding and a profound, mutual respect for the lives they had each led, shaped by a choice made so long ago. Chapter 6, The Unveiling of Love. The visit to Fairhope and the meeting with James was a watershed moment for Sarah. She returned to Charlotte a different woman. The perfect facade of her mother had been shattered, but in its place stood a human being, complex, flawed, and profoundly resilient. And in understanding Evelyn's imperfections, Sarah began to find acceptance for her own. She realized her relentless pursuit of perfection, her constant feeling of inadequacy, stemmed from the unattainable ideal she had projected onto her mother. Evelyn had been an ordinary woman who had made difficult choices, suffered deeply, and loved in her own complicated way. Her mother's hidden life was not a betrayal, but a testament to her strength, her capacity for endurance, and her unwavering, albeit suppressed, inner spirit. The last entries in Evelyn's diary, written just before her death, took on a new profound meaning for Sarah. May 1st, 2024. My body is tired. My time is drawing to a close. I look back on my life, and I see the choices I made, the roads not taken, the love I cherished but could not claim, and the love I built in spite of it all. Richard was a good man. He loved me in his own way, and I tried to love him back. And Sarah, my sweet Sarah, she always looked up to me, always thought I was perfect. I hope one day she finds this diary. I hope she reads these words and understands that perfection is a myth, that life is messy, that love can be complicated and imperfect and still profound. I hope she learns to forgive me for my hidden pain, and most of all, I hope she learns to forgive herself for not being perfect, because true love, the lasting kind, embraces the flaws. I love you, my daughter, more than words can say, and I love you, James, always. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she read these final words. A profound sense of release washed over her. Her mother had known. She had wanted Sarah to understand, to see her not as an ideal, but as a real, struggling, loving woman. And in doing so, Evelyn had offered Sarah the greatest gift, the permission to be imperfect, to be human. Sarah no longer felt the weight of her mother's idealized perfection. Instead, she felt a profound connection, a shared humanity. The unspoken pain of her mother's life became a bridge to her own healing. She spoke openly with her best friend, David, about the diary, about James, about the shattered facade. David, always her rock, listened with compassion, affirming her feelings, helping her process the complex emotions. She started attending art classes, something she had always secretly yearned to do, a tribute to her mother's suppressed passion. She began to embrace the strange art pieces her mother had collected, understanding their true meaning, their silent stories. The abstract painting from New York, the bronze dancer from Paris, they were no longer out of place. They were sacred artifacts of a life truly lived. Fragments of a spirit yearning for freedom. Chapter 7. The Pages of Peace. The old Miller house, once a monument to a perfect but ultimately stifling life, began to breathe anew. Sarah decided to keep it, to transform it not into an ideal, but into a home that reflected the complex, beautiful tapestry of Evelyn's true story. She opened the curtains, letting in the sun. She rearranged the art, placing her mother's secret pieces in prominent places, not as anomalies, but as the heart of the home. She kept in touch with James, a gentle, understanding connection that spanned the years. He continued to send her postcards from his travels, glimpses of the world her mother had only dreamed of. And sometimes they would talk on the phone, sharing quiet memories of Evelyn, keeping her true spirit alive. Sarah's own life took a different trajectory. She continued her architectural work, but with a renewed sense of purpose. a willingness to take risks, to embrace imperfection, to design spaces that felt more authentic, more human. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, to connect with others on a deeper, more honest level. The loneliness she had felt after her parents' deaths began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging, a profound inner peace. She visited her mother's grave often, but her visits were no longer tinged with the weight of idealization or the burden of unfulfilled expectations. Instead, they were moments of quiet communion, of acceptance, of profound gratitude. "Thank you, Mama," she would whisper. "Thank you for showing me the real you. Thank you for setting me free." The diary, a testament to her mother's unspoken pain and hidden desires, became Evelyn's final, most profound act of love. It was a legacy of honesty, a whispered truth that broke through decades of silence, ultimately healing not just the past, but forging a path to a more authentic future for her daughter. Sarah had found her mother, not in the perfect facade she had presented to the world, but in the raw, vulnerable pages of her secret diary. And in doing so, she had finally found herself. The unspoken pages had finally found their voice, and in that voice, Sarah found peace.